Welcome everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me just fine. Thumbs up from the team. Okay, great. In the interest of time, I'm going to get us started. I don't want to keep anyone over time, and we have a lot of material to go through today, so I will start us off. Welcome everyone to the first of two information session webinars that is hosted by Customer First Renewables and the Department of Energy and Mines. I hope everyone today is finding themselves safe and are finding ways to stay healthy. My name is Leanne Outhouse, and I am a policy analyst here with the Department of Energy and Mines. I work mostly on the electricity policy and programs team with David Miller, who's here in the room with me, Kendra Campbell, also here in the room with me, as well as Peter Craig, who you may also be familiar with. The electricity policy and programs team has been working for quite some time on this program in the background, and I am very pleased today to be able to share some of that information with you. Throughout this process, Customer First Renewables and ourselves here at the Department of Energy and Mines have created a partnership to engage with our key stakeholders on the regulation drafting for this program. And we recognize that this sort of early engagement is really key to the program's success. Also, Customer First Renewables, or CFR, has been appointed as the procurement administrator for this program and will be administering the Green Choice program to be launched later this year. This webinar intends to introduce people to the Green Choice program, allow folks to start to understand the key components of the proposed Green Choice program, some areas where you might want to think about where you would want to provide some feedback, and some ways in which you can participate in this program. So following the webinar sessions today, we will be hosting follow-up sessions with the key stakeholder groups to have more focused and intent discussions. We're very interested, as this program is designed and explained, to hear your comments, your questions, your concerns, your thoughts, and your vision for how this program will work for you and how it would be a benefit to you. Leading the webinar sessions are three members, as you can see here, from the CFR team. So we have Suzanne, John, and Terrence, and all of us will be taking turns throughout the webinar to present the slides to you. Just a quick few housekeeping items. Everyone, all the participants are muted, so if you have questions or comments, please share them with us in our chat. Most likely, we will get to them at the very end. We're reserving about 10 to 15 minutes for those questions. As I mentioned, in the room here with me are David and Kendra, so we're available to answer some of those questions as well. This webinar is being recorded and will be available later on the website that we will be sharing with you here in this webinar as well. So, next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit of history on the Green Choice program. As many of the folks on the line may be aware, Nova Scotia has set some ambitious climate change goals, but we're also aware that there are folks out here in Nova Scotia who are aiming to go quicker than what perhaps the rest of the grid may look like. We want to be able to support those goals and those climate change targets. And as part of that conversation, we've been talking to the Government of Canada to help them support their 100% commitment to renewable electricity at all their operations and facilities here in Nova Scotia. The Government of Canada and the province signed an MOU in the summer of 2009, which prompted the development of the Green Choice program. But it is also open to other key stakeholders who may want to get there faster than the rest of the grid. The province recognizes there are limited other options for customers out there right now, with the uptake of renewables to retail being relatively poor, and that the electricity mix currently on the grid is carbon intensive. So last year, in February of 2020, the province made amendments to the Electricity Act, and we're currently in the process of drafting the regulations that will define the rules for this program. The webinar and the ongoing planned engagement is, as I mentioned, an early engagement opportunity between the department and CFR on the line, and we are really seeking stakeholder feedback during this program design stage. The main objective of the program is to encourage large energy customers who are interested to enroll and subscribe to the program. The amount of energy that is enrolled or subscribed will determine the amount of energy that is procured on the subscriber's behalf. A competitive request for proposals will go out for bid submissions. They will be reviewed by the appointed customer first procurement administrator, and they will also be shared, some information will be shared with the customers as well. Final awards will be issued and customers will sign a subscription agreement with the utility, and IPPs or the industry folks will sign a contract like a PPA for with Nova Scotia Power. At a whole, that is sort of the large and big picture of how this program works. Next slide, please. So as I've already kind of mentioned in passing, the program is not yet designed, and the rules set the rules that we're putting before you today are proposed. So we're seeking your input, your thoughts, your concerns, your questions, any points of clarity that we can offer on the program design that we're sharing with you here today. We are preparing this as a sort of a consultative feedback process. We're trying to lean into the innovation process with early engagement, recognizing sort of the known and the unknown as what we think this program should entail. And we're anticipating, of course, that perhaps what we're proposing here is not quite right and that we could do better. With that in mind, I will happily share the rest of the webinar with the folks here on the line, and I will allow them to provide a quick introduction and lead the rest of the webinar. Thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Leanne. And it's on behalf of the entire Customer First Renewables team that we're all very glad to join you here. My name is Suzanne Fratscher. Some of you may know me from previous Canadian work with the Canadian-German Chamber in the past, now with Customer First Renewables, and very pleased to support this exciting initiative. Now, let me go through in the next slides through the overall program steps that we envision at a high level. We will go into further detail a little later in this presentation, and I will also cover more information about who can subscribe. So how will the program be implemented? That's how we envision it today, and you see the color coding matching those target groups that are stakeholder groups that are most involved in each step. So initially, after now the province having appointed Customer First Renewables as the procurement administrator, as Leanne pointed out, we have started the program design and are seeking input from all of you so that we really shape this program and make it a success for all. The next step will be attending to the subscriber community on this call to envision the enrollment process, and that will, on the one hand, involve hearing your intents and expectations for the program, and we would appreciate if you can respond to a voluntary subscriber survey. We will be making this available on the program website shortly, and we would appreciate your response to that, because that will feed in a lot of future steps in the program design and also the demand expectation. The actual enrollment process will be officialized through an expression of interest, where the buyers will express the interest of the procurement size that they have in mind. This will be reviewed by CFR and the department and confirmed by the minister. With the subscriber energy needs known through the expression of interest, we will be able to define the quantity of the renewables that's going to be purchased. Now, there will be, that's at least how it's envisioned, an initial role for the round for the Green Choice Program. And it is upon the confirmation of the minister to determine who will be able to be eligible in this first round, and hence the quantity of renewables procured. There may be other rounds of procurement and subscriber enrollment going forward. As a next step, and in parallel to the prior work, our team and the Department of Energy and Mines is facilitating alignment with all stakeholders on crafting the request for proposals that will go out to industry, as well as finalizing the power purchase agreement contract. These will be issued this year, mid of this year. At the same time, we are working at this to finalize the subscriber agreement and appreciate the input of the stakeholders on this call. And these two main documents, as was shown by Leanne earlier, will really be the contractual frameworks that, for one, will link the buyer community with Nova Scotia Power and the IPP community, as well as with the utility. As a next step, and envisioned to kick off this summer, CFR will issue the request for proposal. We will run the procurement process, evaluate the bids and award successful projects. The buyer community will be consulted in this process. And there will be power purchase agreements executed with the utility. Finally, the subscribers will then execute the subscriber agreement with the utility. And so you see that there will be, between the initial expression of interest and the subscriber agreement, some time as well as a final substantiating contractual commitment only at the end of the process for subscriber to really be linked in the Green Choice Program. So that's the broad overview of how we intend to implement the program. Now, who can enroll? As Leanne said, the province has designed the Green Choice Program for large energy buyers in Nova Scotia. And this involves corporate energy buyers as well as institutional energy buyers. We certainly want to make the program manageable and allow some flexibility. But again, the main focus here is on large corporate institutional customers. And so we have, we envision to have 3 categories of buyers to join. One being corporate or institutional customers that have very large loads. Second, the large buyers that have large loads but are assigned to multiple accounts within the province. And thirdly, we also have an option for public institutions to team up with other public institutions. Now, let me go one level deeper here. As Leanne pointed out initially, the grid in Nova Scotia has already an objective of being about 40% renewable energy powered. And so the Green Choice Program is really designed to addressing the remaining 60% of the load that is not coverable for now with renewables if you purchased it from the grid. Hence, this is really the share of the load that we try to give you the opportunity to procure with green power through the Green Choice Program. We want this Green Choice Program purchase to be at least in 10,000 megawatt hours per year increments. And so either you have a large enough load in one location or across multiple accounts or meters that is amounting to this 10,000 megawatt purchase, or if you have multiple public institutions getting to the 10,000 megawatt hour purchase as a group is really what we are trying to achieve with the program. Now, the question is, why should you enroll in the Green Choice program? And we certainly hope to design the program in a way that it allows subscribers not only to drive new renewable deployment in Nova Scotia, but also to meet their environmental goals in a cost-competitive way. And here you see the four main benefits that we hope you will be able to achieve through participating in the program. For one, we certainly know that more corporate and institutional buyers want to really reduce their emission, and so therefore the program intends to give you the opportunity to really true up beyond the 40% up to 100% of your electricity purchase from renewable energy, impactful renewable energy from new sources in Nova Scotia. So the environmental benefit certainly will be there, and we are working towards allowing you to use claims through owning the environmental attributes. We certainly see a huge reputational benefit for buyers that are really showing leadership by adopting 100% renewable stand to meet customer and stakeholder expectations on climate action. We see societal benefits that you can support by participating in the program as you help accelerate Nova Scotia's transition to clean energy, creating local jobs and investments through renewable energy development in the province. And finally, and this is really one of the key factors that we try to accomplish with the program, is to give you the opportunity to benefit from the cost advantage renewable energy today allows you to benefit from, and really have an opportunity to procure renewables at a very competitive cost. So with that, let me hand it over to my colleague John to show you a little bit about the program design in more detail. John, over to you.
Okay, great. Appreciate that, Suzanne. And, you know, Suzanne and Leanne did a great job of walking through the context and background of the program, the eligibility requirements, the timeline, and the sort of high level of what the benefits are. Sure, one question that comes to mind is, well, how does all of this tie together into a Green Choice program? How do the various actors involved really coalesce around this program and form something that can enable customers to meet their sustainability goals? What we have laid out here is an overview of the program mechanics with the illustration of contract flows between the subscribers, Nova Scotia Power, the developers, and existing assets as well, really to show how all of this interplays within the Green Choice sandbox. So beginning, actually going clockwise and beginning at the top right-hand corner, you see there are existing grid power assets in the grid, so system energy assets that will continue to produce electricity, and the electricity is sent to Nova Scotia Power. Those independent power producers are being compensated at the negotiated grid cost, so that remains business as usual. In addition to the existing system energy, you have these new supply GCP assets, which will likely be wind powered. They'll be providing renewable electricity to the grid, and these assets are driven by the Green Choice program and ultimately driven by customer demand for this program as well. In return for the renewable electricity that's provided to the grid, Nova Scotia Power will be remunerating the developers or developer at a negotiated PPA rate. That's yet to be determined, but that's a $1 per megawatt hour amount. Nova Scotia Power will then be sleeving the renewable electricity and the grid electricity to the subscribers' meters. So we're seeing that in that dashed blue arrow. And in return, subscribers will be compensating Nova Scotia Power in sort of two segments. You have your existing grid power cost, which will cover 40% of customers' load. And that's tied to their existing retail rate. So I think upwards of 9 cents kilowatt hour, depending on the rate class. In addition to that, 60% of their load will be tied to the GCP program. And that cost will be inclusive of that negotiated PPA rate in addition to an integration charge as well. And furthermore, the environmental attributes provided by these new build renewable energy assets will be retired on behalf of the subscribers as well. So maybe taking a step back and reiterating some of what I discussed and some of what my colleagues discussed as well. These renewable projects will be selected via publicly administered RFP process. The cost of both the GCP supplied renewables and your existing grid mix will both be in your customer retail bill. 40% of your load will be tied to your existing system energy. 60% will be tied to the GCP supplied renewable energy, and your environmental attributes will be retired on your behalf, which is great and enables a lot of the participants on this call to meet their aggressive sustainability goals. That said, Suzanne, maybe you can roll for the next slide. Great, appreciate it. So moving away from the illustration and diving into the program functionality as it pertains to predominantly participants, participants being customers. From a program sizing perspective, understand Suzanne and Leanne have received quite a number of phone calls over the last month or two pertaining to the scale of this program. And the scale is really yet to be determined and ultimately will be sized to subscriber demand. So it's important that we get feedback through the voluntary survey and ultimately the expression of interest, so we have a sense of how to size this program. But ultimately, it will be contingent on the amount of capacity that the grid can allow at this point in time. To Suzanne's earlier points, future iterations are expected to be rolled out over the coming years. There's not a set timeline or cadence to that rollout, but I think a lot of that will be dependent on the level of activity and interest we see from this initial iteration. To our earlier points, customers will be subscribing up to 60% of their load. The remaining 40% is already covered in the Nova Scotia renewable grid mix. Customers can subscribe to up to 25 years in 5-year cadences. And one benefit here is that if you choose to subscribe to less than 25 years, you have the optionality to re-up for an additional 5 years to get to that 25-year mark. In terms of cost, really broken out into two buckets. You have your application fee, which is a $500 non-refundable amount that's provided with the expression of interest. And in terms of the actual programmatic costs, two components to that. There's the pass-through PPA pricing, and that will be negotiated. And pricing will expected to be provided likely towards the end of this year, Q3 or Q4. That pricing will also be tiered as well. So customers subscribing to longer tenors will receive a slightly discounted rate, and customers subscribing to smaller tenors will receive a slightly higher rate. There will also be an integration charge as well, and that's tied to the cost of adding new renewables to the grid and predominantly driven by the intermittency of these assets and the increased load balancing required as well. From an enrollment perspective, we're hoping to get customer surveys back from the participants by March 17th. hopefully get some feedback on the core program mechanics, aspects you do like, aspects you're still questionable amounts, and also provide an indication of the amount you plan on subscribing as well. It gives us a decent sense of what the scale of this program may look like. The expression of interest will be a requirement for this program. So if you intend on participating in this program, it's mandatory that you provide an expression of interest. Think of it as an application, if you will. And as I mentioned earlier, that does come with a $500 non-refundable fee. In addition to that, the expectation is that customers provide the locations, the meters, and ultimately the percentage of the load that they plan on subscribing to the program. Ultimately, that's what will drive the scale of this program. And we hope to get to a point where we're in position to execute customer subscriber agreements by the end of this year, or really by the October-November timeframe. Which puts customers on the right path to achieving those sustainability goals, and happy that this program enables you guys to do so. So as we're running through the program mechanics, and my colleague Terrence will delve into the timeline and the aspects that pertain to IPPs. It's really important that you guys take note of elements that you want us to expand upon. You can flag them in the chat box. We can answer them through the Q&A process, or also acknowledge them through the voluntary survey as well. We certainly want to make this customer friendly and ensure that your feedback is on board and incorporated into the process. And with that said, Suzanne, I think you can roll to the next slide.
Thanks for running through that, John. Hello, everybody. My name's Terrence DePenthony O'Kelly. I'm a Director of Renewable Solutions with Customer First Renewables, and we'll be working on the development of this program with everyone on the line here. So I'm going to spend a few moments talking about what the next several months look like to help folks get an understanding of what will be happening when. So as you look across the top of this page, there are a few main buckets of activity that will be happening between now and the end of the year. Over the next few months ahead, we have a subscriber enrollment period. During that period, we will be, as has been mentioned before, soliciting feedback through the form of a voluntary survey. We're eager to get input from the stakeholder group to help ensure that we continue to refine this program and shape it in a way that meets your objectives and your needs. So by mid-March, we'll be looking to receive those surveys so we can continue to incorporate your feedback into the design process. Later this spring, as we get into the sort of June timeframe, we'll be looking to receive expressions of interest, which is going to be a little bit more of your sort of formal enrollment step into the program. So at that point in time, you'll need to stipulate the megawatt hours that you intend to have enrolled in the program, as well as include or pay the application fee associated with enrolling. The subscriber enrollment window should wrap up by the end of June, when the minister will look to confirm the subscriber enrollments. In parallel to that subscriber enrollment process, we have a effort during this same time frame from now until late June to get stakeholder input on several of the key program documents: the RFP itself, the PPA document, which will PPA contract, which will be between the developers and Nova Scotia Power, and the subscriber agreement, which would be between the subscribers themselves and Nova Scotia Power. So during that parallel process, we'll be inviting participants to comment on the form of those documents and looking to finalize the form of those documents. Ultimately aiming to conclude with the Utility Review Board approval of the PPA by the end of June. That's the target timeframe. As you can see at the bottom of the timeline, we have an RFP development process that will begin in May, but aiming to conclude by approximately mid-July. As we conclude that process, we'll then look to issue the RFP to the IPP community and expect that RFP window to be open until approximately mid-August. So the deadline for IPP proposals is expected to be that mid-August timeframe. As we then get into the next phase, the bid winnowing phase, we'll be working through evaluation of the proposals on a variety of different dimensions, which we'll talk about in a few moments, and hope to conclude that bid evaluation and winnowing and selection process by approximately October of this year. As we then get into October, we will work in parallel to both firm up the award and report the award both to the minister and publicly, as well as work on the execution of the contract documents. Ultimately, we're driving towards a targeted execution of the PPAs and the subscriber agreements towards the end of the year, approximately November timeframe. So those are the sort of major components of activity that will be ongoing over the course of 2021. Suzanne, with that, maybe you can move on to the next slide. So I'm now going to spend a few minutes drilling down into what we anticipate may be some of the sort of early considerations or questions that some of the subscribers have or prospective subscribers. And following this, we'll do the same thing for members of the IPP community. So to begin with, on the subscriber dimension. So, you know, we're well aware of some of the uncertainty that is sort of presented by the fact that this program is not yet crystallized in terms of all of its details. And so some of you may be wondering, well, how can we participate in the regulatory process, or, you know, how do we gain comfort in the details of the program if it still needs to go through the regulatory process before it's finalized? So really the key is that we're looking for your input at this stage. There is a period here between now and approximately May timeframe when we'll have firmed up the PPA and the subscriber agreement and the RFP, where we're sort of inviting stakeholder input to shape the program. So this is your opportunity now to help drive the direction of the program, and we ultimately anticipate that by about June timeframe, the program will be crystallized, and by that point, everybody should have certainty on the final details of how the program will be structured, so that you can make your decisions, whether it be from an subscriber enrollment perspective or from an IPP participation perspective, as to whether you intend to continue to participate in the program. So from an enrollment perspective, you know, what types of obligations will you have once you're enrolled in the program? So the principal obligation will be once you're enrolled in the program, you have a subscriber agreement in place, and the underlying assets have become operational, you will then be required to continue to pay the monthly charges associated with the program. So this was what John was talking about a few moments ago, associated with up to 60% of your load. If during the enrollment process we are unable to allocate you or confirm your subscription in the full volume that is desired, then the fallback that we would recommend is that you then participate in a subsequent round of the Green Choice program. So I think that as Suzanne mentioned up front, we are intending for this to be the beginning of a multiple round green choice program that will unfold over the next few years. So we anticipate having a fresh enrollment window perhaps about a year from now, and prospectively, another year thereafter. So if you're unable to satisfy your full load requirements in this round, there will be other opportunities in the future. From a subscription volume and adjustment perspective, one of the questions you may be thinking is, well, how do I determine what my usage levels are to propose to the program? So we're looking for subscribers to work with their utility reps to confirm and verify your annual usage, so that when you are submitting your expressions of interest and the targeted megawatt hours you would like to have addressed, that those have been developed already, consulting your utility bill, and if needed, validated by Nova Scotia Power. Some of you may be wondering, well, what if we enroll for a certain amount but want to change that subscription over time? So this is an aspect of the program that has not yet been finalized, and we invite your input here. I think that there are obvious implications for a subscriber changing their volume over time, whether it's the need for additional capacity to meet an incremental volume request, or if it's what to do with the output of a project if your subscription volume declines over time. So those are important considerations that will help drive the answer to this question. But having said that, we do want to hear from subscribers about your thoughts on this question, and how strongly you feel about your load certainty at the outset of the contract. And then lastly, it's probably really jumping a few steps ahead to already be contemplating program exit when we're just talking about the program for the first time. But I know it's an important characteristic when we're talking about long-term contracts, from 5 to 25 years. So what you may be wondering what the mechanics would be if you wanted to terminate your contract early. So the expectation is that there will be provisions that allow you to terminate and exit early, but with termination fees associated with probably with the remaining balance of the value of the contract. We are working through some different methodologies for how to approach the calculation of this termination fee, but that is likely the construct that we'll proceed with. And if you terminate, would you have the ability to re-enroll in the future? The answer to that is yes. So we anticipate, as I mentioned earlier, the program being rolled out over a handful of years. So provided that there's another enrollment window in the future, you would be free to re-enroll at that time. Suzanne, maybe we can move to the next slide to look at some considerations that may be front of mind for the IPP community. So to begin with, what technologies do we anticipate soliciting in the RFP later this year? So the answer is low impact renewable electricity as it's defined in Nova Scotia. So we will be open to any type of technology that satisfies that definition. One thing just to call out is that there were some updates to the system interconnection requirements that were made in December of last year. So we just want to call that to the IPP community's attention, so that as you do prepare your technology packages, that you're just aware of the latest code. From a sizing perspective, how much do we intend to solicit in the procurement? Well, that number is going to be informed by the subscriber expressions of interest. Our objective will be to solicit a volume that is able to meet the entirety of the volume requested in the expressions of interest. Having said that, we will be just looking to ensure that doesn't exceed any grid constraints. So there may be some limitations on the volume that are driven more by physical infrastructure limits that could reduce the amount relative to how much is requested by subscribers. Do we intend to procure this through one or multiple assets? Well, it could be either. That's not decided. That's TBD. Target commercial operations date. So this is fairly loose and again is something that we're looking for the subscriber community to help inform. Our anticipation is it could be anywhere from as early as 2022 through to perhaps as late as 2025, but we will be refining that criteria over the weeks and months ahead as we get feedback from customers. In terms of contractual arrangements, so the award to IPPs stemming from this procurement will be a PPA with Nova Scotia Power for a 25-year term. That PPA is likely to look very similar to the form PPA used in prior Nova Scotia procurements, with one potential change, which would be the addition of provisions around ancillary services. Just to call it out, it's probably expected by most of the IPP community, but there may be security posting requirements based on sort of the credit evaluation of bidders. How are we going to be picking the projects and winnowing the bids? So a few indicative selection criteria out of the gate. The first, economics are of course important. As was mentioned early on, we really want to try to make this program a success, and in order for that to happen, we need the economic proposition to make sense for all parties involved. So the economic dimension is pretty front and center. The second is that there may be locational preferences for where projects are situated on the grid. We are working to finalize a map that would indicate preferred grid locations, which would likely be included in the RFP. The third would be the capabilities and experience of the bidders. And then a fourth criteria would be around the potential provision of some of the ancillary services. There's a link in this deck, and the deck will be posted to the website, but the link here is for a study that was conducted recently to help evaluate the value of ancillary services in Nova Scotia. So it may be that is included as a sort of optional bonus selection criteria. We've mentioned this a few times, but we do anticipate that this RFP may be repeated in future years. So with that, I think that captures the main set of considerations we wanted to share right out of the gate. Suzanne, maybe we can move on to the last page before we open it up to the Q&A portion of the meeting. So just to summarize, there's a few sort of near-term or next steps that we want each of the different stakeholder groups that are part of this program to think about. So for subscribers, the most near-term action is to share your thoughts and preferences through the voluntary survey. We're looking for responses on this within about the next month. The voluntary survey will be circulated on the website, but if anybody has any questions or any subscribers have specific follow-up questions, they should feel free to reach out to CFR, and there's an email address that we'll share at the back end of the discussion for you all to be able to direct your questions to. For the IPP community, we will be looking to issue the RFP by mid-July. Before then, we're looking for your inputs on the PPA and the RFP once those are ready for your input, but we anticipate that being over the course of the spring. From the utility perspective, we're looking to collaborate with Nova Scotia Power to create a real leading example of a green tariff that hopefully other utilities across Canada can look to as a model to replicate. And then from the perspective of the Department of Energy and Mines, and the procurement administrator will be looking to have follow-up engagement with all of the different stakeholders to solicit your feedback and input. As we've said, we really want this to be a collaborative process that helps create the best possible green tariff program. So we're very much in a listening and feedback mode over the next few months, and we'll be looking to have discussions with many of you to get your input. We'll be formulating the RFP and finalizing the PPA, and again, looking for participant feedback on that. And we'll be looking to keep the subscriber community well informed as we move through the process, as well as generally recognizing that we won't be able to satisfy the objectives of all stakeholders, but hopefully we can find a middle ground that most of the stakeholders on the line here feel represents sort of a good alignment of everybody's interests in this program. Well, with that, I think that covers the bulk of the content that we wanted to introduce to you all here. I think that we're now at a point where we can shift into the Q&A mode, and just to reiterate some of the comments made at the outset by Leanne and Suzanne, we're very excited about launching this program, and look forward to hearing your feedback and questions whilst we continue to refine the design here. With that, Leanne, maybe I'll turn it to you to sort of chair the process of answering the questions that have been coming in through the chat.
Absolutely happy to do that. Turn my video back on. So I think Terrence just quickly did an overview here, and I wanted to just reiterate that the website here that's listed is live, so you can go. It's pretty limited. We'll be adding more things in the coming weeks so that people have reference materials following the webinars to review. As I mentioned at the beginning, there will be some follow-up sessions with stakeholder groups, so some reach outs, some very targeted reach outs, with our key stakeholders, including the utility, the IPP community, as well as interested customers. The color coding here is just to give you an idea of who you should be talking to. We've kind of divided and conquered some of the work, but generally, if you include us both, we'll figure it out behind the scenes, and that's totally fine. Just for everyone's on the line, if you are a First Nation, an IPP, or you are the utility, it will be the department that's leading that conversation with the support of Customer First. If you are an interested customer or a buyer, it is Customer First that will be leading that discussion with our support as well. So just a quick overview there, and I think the team has largely been doing the best we can to answer the questions as they came in. So if folks want to head over there and to start looking at them, and I will get an idea of which ones have not yet been answered. I believe Robert's question has been answered. And as I mentioned, the presentation will be available on the website listed here, and it will be recorded so everyone can have access to it. The question there from Angie about how to validate or look at new energy load. We'll be working with Nova Scotia Power to understand the best way to approach this, ways to validate the, I guess, the energy modeling and the load or the anticipated load, as well as potential assurances that might be required if folks are enrolling new load, either through expansions, new facilities, or if they're a brand new customer to the system. I did answer, I believe, Dave's question there in the chat, but just for the folks on the line, we mentioned that it's likely to be wind, and that's mostly from the cost competitive side of things. However, the program itself is technology agnostic and does need to meet the regulatory requirements for low impact renewable energy. And as we've already mentioned, there will be a map that will kind of highlight some of those geographical requirements based on the grid. We're working on that to get that out to folks early as part of the ongoing discussion with especially the IPP community as we're developing the RFP. The intent is to have it ready for the for the RFP in that time frame.
Leanne, there are some additional questions in the Q&A box. Perhaps one that is pertaining to new versus existing load might be interesting to answer.
All right, yes, thank you very much, Sam. So that was a question that came in. So question is, can you elaborate on the environmental attributes? How does the bypassing of Nova Scotia Power for these attributes impact Nova Scotia Power requirements for renewable energy today, the 40%? Or on the future IRP aspirations for net zero or near net zero? And I'm going to hand that over to David.
So to answer this question, I think that we haven't finalized how we will approach this, but the intention is not to relieve Nova Scotia Power of compliance with 40%. This will be in addition to. This new renewable energy must be separate from the currently required 40% RES threshold. Other attributes associated, we'll continue to work with Nova Scotia Power and customers to determine how best to ensure that customers who require, RECs to be retired on their behalf, or however we want to manage that. But we're interested in hearing stakeholder feedback on what kind of assurances or commitments or documentation they require from the utility or from the program in order to meet internal corporate goals or other kind of mandated components for proof that they are powered by 100% renewable energy.
Question here about the voluntary survey. That's correct. It's only by the potential customers. I would say this is the area that we have the least amount of information so far. And since the amount enrolled will determine the amount that we go out for RFP, the earlier we can get a rough idea of what that looks like, the better for us in terms of planning processes. So as we mentioned, that should be available shortly. We're making a commitment to have it up by hopefully next week. It's in the process behind the scenes here to get it done so that it's available for everyone. There is a question here about the First Nations partnerships, and that's actually under discussion right now. We have not had a chance to have a focused discussion yet with our First Nations partners, and we will be asking and seeking their impact specifically on how they want to be involved in this program, and that may include partnerships or ownership. And yes, the website is blocked by government firewall. Thank you, Rachel. I am going to contact ICT to fix that. That's on our side for a government firewall. I recognized that earlier today or last night. Thank you. Which ones have not yet been answered, Suzanne? Team?
I think part was related to the time of subscribers versus the term of the PPA, which is about to be 25 years. There were a couple of questions around that, and we certainly are working through a process to acknowledging that the PPA will be 25 years while subscribers will have the ability to sign up for shorter term increments. And we're in the process of determining the details. And this is really an area where we expect input from the buyer community to help us design the program so that it meets the needs. And while hearing this, we certainly need to be conscious that risks need to be managed in the most appropriate way for all parties involved. Let's see, what other questions do we have?
There's a question in the Q&A from Dan. Is there an estimated minimum or maximum procurement target threshold for the first RFP? Not yet. That will be informed by the customer surveys and the expressions of interest. So we will triangulating on that range in the months ahead.
So to answer Peter's question about environmental attributes, and I think we have a number of attribute questions, so happy to have subscriber feedback on how they would like to treat those. But our intention here is that is not to enable additional trading after subscription to the program. So if you subscribe for new renewables, those are retired on your behalf or not otherwise available for trading after that. If you feel strongly otherwise as a customer, we'd like to hear from you about your interest there and what that would look like.
Okay.
And in addition, in our current structure, and again, to be determined or finalized by regulation, we are looking to have subscribers to this program would not have to pay for any compliance with carbon pricing for Nova Scotia Power's electricity generation. As the portfolio that you're subscribed to has no carbon obligation, you would have no carbon obligation inside of that.
So I hope that helps to answer some of those questions around environmental attributes. Most commonly, when we're referring to environmental attributes, we're referring loosely to sort of the renewable energy mix to meet certain climate change goals, like a stated either emissions reduction target or carbon-free emissions for their energy sector or in their energy use. That's loosely what it refers to in this context. So when it comes to the EOIs, in terms of the review process, the intent here is that, of course, we're going to review for completeness and to make sure that it meets the components of the program. However, there may be some complexities involved in the person's application or subscription request that we may feel is better suited through one of the other programs or policies or initiatives that the government has available or in the works at this time. And of course, we'd be communicating with those EOI applicants at that time. However, it is a risk as it is identified right now. Say, for example, we know that there are 20 megawatts, for example, that would be asked for by the EOI volume intake. They are enrolled into the program. They are taken down the sort of ongoing conversation around the RFP and the bids come in, but perhaps at some point in that process, a applicant or a enrolled customer, for example, decides not to enroll or to formally sign the subscription agreement contract with the utility. They can exit that process at any time with written notification. You are under no obligation as a customer to sign that contract at that point. However, of course, we would like to avoid that at all costs if we can, and handle sort of those discrepancies as best we can. And if there are, I guess, input or questions or thoughts into how we can do that, again, we are open to your thoughts on that piece.
And I'll just add to that that we will not convert an RFP bid into a PPA until we have customer purchase confirmed for that amount of energy. So the system will not bear that risk. We will only confirm the bids and then convert those into PPAs once we have that customer contract completed and signed for the actual cost proposed.
We're almost up on time, but I think there was there were a couple questions that revolved around valuing on-peak versus off-peak deliveries of energy, as well as how balancing would be managed. So that's still a moving piece in the program here. I do think a few things worth commenting on. The expectation is that likely the PPA will be for a fixed price and will not necessarily look for differing values over time. The balancing activities or the differential value in when power is delivered to the grid is more likely to be integrated into into the economic equation for the subscriber. So that, I think John mentioned there may be an integration charge of sorts that would likely look to value that time-based differential in the cost of power. That there was another question that sort of related to the value of non-energy related products, and I think we touched on briefly, there's still evaluation ongoing of the integration of ancillary service provisions into the contract. So it may well be that there's additional revenue drivers for IPPs beyond the delivery of power, assuming that the ancillary services can be provided.
And a few questions. I know we're at time, so if we have not yet had a chance to answer your questions, we apologize. Please make a note of them. And if you are involved in the IPP community, a preferred way to approach this would be to roll it up to your industry association, and we will handle those questions in that way and provide whatever clarity we can. As I mentioned, there will be some resources available on the website shortly that will help. There is a program guide or a program overview guide that will be available for people to review and start making some comments and questions in as well to inform those follow-up discussions. In terms of who's eligible, I've seen a few questions there. So public institutions, and that includes government from all levels, public institutions like universities or education facilities or education centers. It could include hospitals, it could include First Nations, it could include social enterprises or commercial, corporate or industry. So for now, the door's pretty wide open there as long as it meets that large energy user requirement. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. As we mentioned, this will be available online for folks to take a look at, and those further resources will be available shortly as well. We're making a commitment to have it to you by next week. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time today, and please feel free to reach out if you have further questions or you want to set up some follow-ups. Thanks, everyone.